It's California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance in Sacramento today. We are joined by a new member of the California State Assembly. His name is Jay Obernolte, representing beautiful Big Bear and surrounding areas. And I want to speak with you about representing Big Bear, your hometown. You had been a council member, you had been mayor. Talk to me about moving from a smaller town to Sacramento.
Oh, it's extremely challenging. You know, it feels like learning to drink from a fire hose
Right.
at sometimes. But I think the most challenging piece is I'm the kind of person that I want to read everything that's in front of me. And when you get up here, you have a staff specifically because you can't possibly read everything that's put in front of you. So that's been challenging. And I still try and read everything that I possibly can in the hours that I have. My staff promises me that's a habit I will get out of, but I hope not anytime soon.
But it's interesting because we know you're a scientist. We know that you're a businessman. And so I understand that desire. I used to be a lawyer. You know, so we have this desire to consume and make sure that we can dot every I and cross every T, same in science. So how are you able to try to figure out what's important?
You know, I think I tunnel down on the things I feel I don't fully understand. And so that's been a lot more difficult for me at the beginning here because there's a lot of things that I need to learn more about. And then as time goes by, it's going to be easier because I'll have a thorough understanding of a lot of the things that I'll see, you know, based on my previous experience.
At the same time, you know, you think about a state legislature, you think about the federal Congress, filled with a lot of lawyers, and I don't disparage my former colleagues, because I was a lawyer, not filled with a lot of scientists. And so I ask you, as a scientist, talk to me about what that background does for you. How does it help you? How does it inform you as a member of the state legislature?
Well, I think it helps to be very analytical because as a scientist or an engineer, you have the ability to look at a problem and say, I understand this, this, and this, but I don't understand this, and I don't understand how these two pieces fit together. And once you have that understanding, you form a framework that you can base your decisions off of, and I think that's really valuable.
At the same time, though, can it be tricky? Because again, you just have a certain knowledge base that others don't. It doesn't mean one's more intelligent than the other, but you just have the knowledge, you got the degree. So can it be tricky when you're trying to speak with folks that just don't have that same base?
I don't think so. I think it's the opposite. I think that to be an effective legislative body requires people from all kinds of different backgrounds because we all bring to the table our own unique set of life experiences and our own way of looking at the world. And that's been the greatest thing about coming up here is to meet the quality of the people up here is completely exceeded my expectations.
And let's talk about why bringing that experience, that varied experience, is particularly beneficial in the new era that we know as term limit reform.
Yes.
Explain why you believe, and many believe, that this new era really will allow legislators to tap into their own personal knowledge in a more dramatic way.
Well, as you know, we're now, with the new term limits, we have 12 years, 6 terms here in the Assembly, any combination of the Assembly and the Senate, which is twice as long as it was previously. And I think that's really a good thing for California because one of the things that we lost with term limits was our policy experts. Because some of these areas of policy, particularly things like water policy or utilities, are so complicated, very technical, they're kind of arcane. They require years of really diving in and sinking your teeth into to get an understanding of. And when you only have 6 years, you just don't have the time to become an expert.
I want to push you a bit, though,
Okay.
because one could argue that when I want to go see a surgeon or a lawyer or an eye doctor or a video game developer, I would like someone with extensive experience. Not 5 years, not 10 years, but 20 years experience. And so why not extend term limits or eliminate them completely? Because look, I want the most experienced person to serve me in whatever capacity that is. Lawyer, doctor, legislator. Why not?
Well, I mean, the arguments against it are you also want to avoid situations where someone gets elected and just by the power of incumbency is able to keep onto that seat for term after term after term. And that's also not a healthy thing.
No doubt. But is there a way, and this is more of a philosophical academic conversation, if I may, to address that differently as opposed to artificially with the firm 12 years?
So how would you do it?
Fundraising reform, I don't know. I mean, let's have fun. You know, fundraising reform, make it easier to vote. lots of different ways.
Well, it's interesting to talk about because I think it's very valuable for the Assembly and the Senate to have an institutional memory.
Right.
And you need to have members there that are able to look back on a decision that was made a few years ago and tell all of the newcomers, look, this is why we made this decision, or, hey, I remember the bad things about this, or to hold departments accountable. So the next time you hear from the Department of Finance, you say, look, did you do that reporting that we asked you to do? Because 4 years ago we asked you to do that and you haven't done it.
Right.
I think that's really important.
Another interesting element of the state legislature, as opposed to city councils in California, is under California law, there is something called the Brown Act. And the Brown Act prevents one member to speak with a majority of other members about an issue that will be before the council. Its purpose is transparency, but some have said it disincentivizes collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have that issue here. Even if the Brown Act applied to the state legislature, to get to 41 would be difficult.
Right.
To talk to 41 different people. How is that playing into your venture, your journey here, that you can collaborate without having to worry about violating the Brown Act?
Yeah, well, a couple things to say about that.
Yeah.
First of all, I've been surprised about how much decision-making up here is based on collegiality. So relationships with people are very important, particularly now that we're in the era of 12-year term limits. So many times in the legislature, you'll see a piece of legislation and your view of that legislation is colored by whoever's name is attached to it. And if you have a relationship with them and you remember that the 10 bills prior to this have been pretty reasonable bills, you're likely to see it in a different light than if it's something where every bill from that legislator has been problematic, and then you're really going to tunnel down.
Right.
So those relationships are very important. But I think we need to work more on transparency as a government.
And I want to talk about that, but are you able to build relationships on both sides of the aisle?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And I have been surprised at the lack of partisan divide up here.
So you feel as if, even though you're a member of the minority party, the Republican caucus, there's influence that you can exert, in the best sense.
Well, you might argue that they just haven't crushed my freshman optimism yet.
One could argue.
But yes, so far I think so.
Tell me more about transparency. I know that you're looking to create more transparency. I think one of your bills, is it AB 410, is that right, sir?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, tell us about your transparency and your desire to create more.
Well, I think in general, transparency is good governance.
Right.
And California historically has not been a very transparent government. In fact, I think we just got a grade of D from in legislative transparency.
And I know that one of the main sticking points is how long a bill is in print.
Yes.
That has raised the ire of so many legislators, Democrat and Republican.
Absolutely.
And so what do you want to do with AB 410?
Well, AB 410 is a pretty simple bill. Right now, when a state agency submits a report to the legislature, that report is required to be posted online on that agency's website. But however, that rule does not apply to reports submitted to a committee of the legislature. And once you get up here, you realize that most of the work of the legislature is actually done in committee. It's not done on the floor.
And as I understand it, your bill is marching pretty nicely through the legislature.
So far, so good.
It seems as if your friends on the Democratic side see the merits of it, and it's marching through committees. Of course, the majority party is able to kind of see what marches through. Why do you think that is? Is it the merits? Is it the collegiality? People like J. Obernolte? Combination of all?
Well, I like to think it's the merits, actually. And I have found that to be the case up here, that a lot of times if you're able to make a compelling argument for something, and you're able to put it in terms that are non-adversarial, that you can get bipartisan support.
So what comes next for J. Obernolte? What's your next goal?
I'm still
I don't mean, next office. I mean, being up here.
Well, we were talking about policy experts,
Right.
and I would like to become a policy expert, and I am looking for bodies of policy that I can sink my teeth into.
How about water? Can you get into water?
Water's a
We need
potential
you.
very complicated
Right.
water. Utilities is actually one of the ones that I'm looking at right now. I sit on the Utilities and Commerce Committee, and I really think that utility policy has the potential to be an area where over the next 10 years, that'll influence the future of our constituency more than any other.
His name is J. Obernolte. He's a member of the California State Assembly. I'm in Sacramento. It's California Edition.